episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so as I said last week, time for a change, and I think a gin episode of the show is long overdue. And I promised Warner Edwards that I would do an episode of the show after their rep popped into the shop and kindly left me some samples. So here we are. This is the Warner Edwards episode of the show, and as you can see, they produce a number of different gins. So I think it should be quite interesting. Now, a little bit of history about Warner Edwards. Now, it was basically the concept, I suppose, of the business was founded in sort of 1997 when two guys met at Agricultural College. Those two guys being Sion Edwards and Tom Warner, and hence the name Warner Edwards. And they both come from farming backgrounds. I think both their families owned farms, one in Wales and one in Northampton. And they decided that they really wanted to go into business together. So initially, I believe that the whole idea was to sort of produce essential oils, certainly lavender, I believe. And I'm not quite sure which way round this kind of goes. I don't know whether they decided to build the distillery first, which was built and opened, should we say, in 2012, or whether they kind of had the idea eventually to do the gin and then built this. I think that they built the distillery first, because, like I said, essentially they wanted to go into distilling essential oils, but realised that actually once they'd sort of got through the harvest and the still would be sat empty for or unused for a large proportion of the year, which, when you've spent large amounts of money on having built, it's kind of a bit pointless, really, isn't it? So their next idea was to basically make a vodka. They thought that they could grow the cereal on Sion's farm and make a vodka, but then they realised that the time and effort and money in sort of taking essentially making a base spirit to sort of 96% or whatever it is, was just not worth it at all. So, gin, why not? I mean, I don't know whether the two guys actually liked gin or had a sort of a burning desire to make gin, or whether it was kind of like, well, we've got a still here, we're going to have to do something with it. But anyway, gin they make, and a number of them they do. So basically, the still that they use is a fairly largish Holstein still, similar to the one that Jamie Baxter uses to create Burleys on. It has capacity for 8 plates in its rectifying still, but apparently they only use the 4 because that just they just like the way the spirit comes out with just using the 4 rectifying plates. Apparently the still is called Curiosity, which is an interesting name because most rectifiers or distillers or what have you tend to name the still after family member or something like that. But this was apparently because they found a cat's paw print in the cement or the cement floor of the converted barn that they used. Whether that was there originally or whether that was after the conversion, I don't honestly know, but they assumed that well, maybe Curiosity didn't kill the cat, but it seemed like apparently a good name for a still. Why not, I suppose. So anyway, like I said, like most gin producers, they are in actual fact what you would call rectifiers rather than distillers, because they buy in the base spirit from Langley's in Birmingham, which is obviously 96% or thereabouts. And unlike a lot of rectifiers, they don't actually macerate their botanicals in the base spirit overnight. Certainly I know that that's what Jamie Baxter does at Burley's, again going back to that because I did the tour and all that kind of stuff. They essentially put the neutral spirit in, add some still water, spring water and the botanicals, and then off they jolly well go. And it's a 12-hour distillation process, which results in a spirit of around about 90% ABV, which they then cut with local spring water to 44%. and then leave it to sit for 16 days before bottling, or as in the case of some of the other gins, they're, you know, the final stage, shall we say. So there you have it. I mean, obviously that's a very, very brief piece of information about the company itself. You can obviously find out more about them on their website, and there's a couple of interesting articles on the Gin Foundry website on Warner Edwards as well. So if you want some more information and you're that way inclined, take a look at those. So let's have a look at the gins that we're going to be tasting this afternoon. I could have tried, but I'm not so sure. Right, okay, so obviously the most obvious place to start is with their Harrington dry gin, where it all kind of started in 2012. The botanicals for this are juniper, cardamom, angelica root, black pepper, cinnamon quills, elderflower and orange. So no weird and wacky botanicals there. I believe a lot of them, the botanicals, are sourced from their own farms, and so although not quite sort of representing the locale of Northampton, so to speak, they're certainly you know, has a kind of a tie-in with their own sort of backgrounds, which I think is quite nice. And at the moment the big thing seems to be about this kind of, not provenance with regards to gin. I mean, it's sort of you know, got to be sort of produced by yourself if you're going to be called a craft distiller and all this kind of stuff. It's all got to be produced locally and all this. But anyway, what really matters at the end of the day is, to me, what the gin tastes like. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, on to the second bottling we'll be looking at. This is the Elderflower gin, which is bottled at 40%, introduced into the range in 2013. And basically they take the Harrington dry gin, macerate or infuse it with elderflower post distillation, and also sweeten it with sugar. So in essence almost like an Old Tom, really. The elderflower again comes from their own farm, so it's a combination of English and Welsh elderflower, and I'm guessing the ABV comes down naturally to 40% once you've added the sugar and the elderflower and what have you. The next two bottlings are sort of kind of like a range within a range, if you like. It's what they call their Botanical Garden range, and the first one was released in I think it was 2016, and this is called the Melissa gin, which they decided to create an entirely new recipe for, which I couldn't tell you the exact botanicals, but I'm guessing that it contains some of the ones that they already use, and the main change to that was the use of lemon balm, so could be interesting. The second in the Botanical Garden range is called the Honeybee gin, and was released, I believe, last year in partnership with the Royal Horticultural Society, and I think some of the profits go to that particular charity. Again, I think it's a new recipe. Some of the botanicals include juniper, grapefruit, orange, lemon, elderflower, hibiscus, cinnamon, cardamom, and obviously honey again, which I think comes from their own farms. So again, could be interesting. And the next one we'll be looking at is the Rhubarb gin. Now, I tasted a number of Rhubarb gins, and a lot of them either tend to be too sweet or too bitter, you know, or too sour rather than bitter, to be honest with you. And although I haven't tasted it yet, I will say this is probably the nicest of the Rhubarb gins that I've tasted, shall we say. And I think part of the reason why it is so successful is that it's not a case of they macerating rhubarb in the spirit like you would making a Sloe gin or something like that, or the Elderflower gin. They basically take crushed rhubarb juice, add it, redistill it again, so you get a more, I'm guessing the idea is, as you can see from the colour, a lighter sort of hued gin, but also, you know, a more delicate sort of rhubarby kind of note. And I must admit, I don't particularly like rhubarb, but anyway. The other interesting thing about this, they call it the Victoria's rhubarb gin, and it's apparently the rhubarb comes from a farmer who farms for the Crown Estates in Lincoln, and I believe that the rhubarb is the same variety that was grown in Queen Victoria's garden in the 1800s, so hence the royal tie-in there. And the last gin we'll be looking at today is the Sloe gin, which is bottled at 30% and they use Northamptonshire Sloes in. So yeah, and yeah, it's probably going to taste of Sloe, one hopes, and obviously looking at the colour, it probably is. So anyway, that's this afternoon's little lineup. Let's see what they taste like then. Okay, so let's kick off with the Harrington dry gin. Let's see what the nose gives us. Lovely, fresh, crisp juniper, citrus. I'm getting a little bit of the orange notes. There's a sort almost kind of resiny kind of character to it. A slight oiliness. Cardamom obviously coming through. The cinnamon is kind of giving a kind of a nice kind of warming spice note, and it's kind of, yeah, it's classic sort of London dry style. It's a lovely nose. I'm not getting a sort of a huge amount from the base spirit, it has to be said. I think that I tend to find that sort of rectifiers tend to either sort of, they fall into either category. It's basically they don't want spirit character because they just want the sort of, you know, the emphasis to be about the botanicals, and others obviously want some kind of influence from the base spirit. And sometimes that a little bit of base spirit note is kind of, it's nice. I like that. I like to know what the base spirit kind of comes from. But sometimes it can be, it just imparts a little bit too much character. And kind of maybe sort of detracts a little bit from the botanicals, but this is absolutely spot on. It's a lovely nose. It's just kind of, yeah, just a classic gin. Really balanced. Let's see what the palate gives us. Quite oily, but it's got that the citrus and the alcohol kind of like balance that up, give it a nice fresh edge. Quite a bit of elderflower character actually on the palate, although it's not particularly sweet, and the juniper does kind of come in fairly promptly. So it's really nicely balanced. The spices are really gentle. They come through sort of towards the end. Certainly I'm getting a little bit of cinnamon, that sort of warming cinnamony kind of note, with a little bit of the slightly more astringent cardamom. They're giving it that kind of not quite bitter greenness, but sort of a slight edginess, which when worked in with the citrus and the alcohol, kind of, it just gives it a really nice fresh finish. So in essence, that is a very, very flavourful gin, and very, very nice. Now you're gone to a silent sea, and maybe okay, so let's move on to the elderflower gin. Let's see what nose gives us on this. It's quite dense. Certainly doesn't have the fresher sort of elements of the Harrington. It's a bit heavy, oily. Obviously the elderflower is quite dominant. I'm not getting a huge amount of juniper, but it kind of does what it says on the tin. You know, it's an elderflower gin, and it has quite like I say, a dense, oily elderflower character, as opposed to a sort of a more florally kind of elderflower character. It's got a slight sweetness, which again I'm guessing is kind of adding to the sort of density feeling of the nose. A lot of the other sort of the more sort of spicier elements seem to have kind of drifted way back, and they're kind of there, but they're not sort of really there, if you can see what I mean. It probably doesn't make a great deal of sense, does it, actually, thinking about it? But anyway, let's see what it tastes like. Dense, sweet, oily, elderflower. In actual fact, it kind of works quite nicely together. Again, the juniper is kind of a bit more laid back, a bit sort of obviously behind the sugar and the elderflower notes. Again, the spices are very subtle, and I think if you like it, I mean, I think it's a nice gin, and I think if you like the sort of if you like elderflower flavoured gins, it kind of, I don't know whether this it's interesting with the sweetness, and like I said, it is kind of obviously in an old Tom kind of style. So I don't think everybody's going to like that kind of style of gin, but you know, I think it works. I think it's pleasant. Maybe I'd like to have seen a little bit more juniper kind of coming through, but certainly I think it does what it says on the tin. Okay, so let's move on to the first of the botanical gardens. This is the Melissa. Let's see what the nose gives us. God damn, that's oily. Just nothing like I remember the first time I tasted it. It was just wonderfully botanical, almost a riot. And I'm guessing this is always going to be the issue with batches. They are going to differ from time to time, and it's actually got quite pungent, almost wheatiness. This has got a lot of base spirit character, and I'm not really getting a lot of juniper, and I'm not getting a lot of botanicals, and I'm getting a bit of lemon. It's a bit earthy, it's a bit, I hate to say it, it's a little bit flat, and a bit dusty, and a bit, it's kind of not really sort of setting my pants on fire, it has to be said. That's a technical term, I hasten to add. Yeah, let's see what the palate's like. Quite oily. Kind of, I get the impression there's a bit of, maybe a bit of faint's gone into this, possibly. Maybe the cut wasn't taken quite at the right point. I don't know. It's very heavy. It's got a lot of kind of salt spirit character. It's almost wheatiness, kind of character, but not quite. I'm kind of struggling to kind of pin down what that sort of base spirit character is, but I think the closest I can get is kind of wheat. And maybe that's what happened here. I'm not getting a huge amount of juniper. I'm getting a bit of lemon, getting a bit of spice. It's kind of earthy, but I just kind of feel with this particular batch, I think maybe a cut point slipped, and there was a little bit too much of the faints has got into this, and I could be wrong, but that's what it feels like to me. It has to be said. Okay, so let's move on to the Honeybee. Let's see what nose gives us on this end, shall we? Honey, funnily enough, but it's got that sort of honeycomb kind of character. It's sort of like, I think when I was tasting this the first time around. This is the first time the second time I've tasted it. It kind of reminded me a little bit of kind of the honeycomb you're getting crunchy, so, but obviously without the chocolate. It's got a nice freshness to it. There's some obvious grapefruit notes kind of coming through, which is, and I think that's what you need with this, with the honey, to kind of balance it. There's a bit of juniper. It's kind of quite interesting because there's a bit of a battle going on between the sweetness and the sort of like the citricness, and it's interesting, I think is the word I would use. There's a little bit of cardamom kind of coming through, a little bit of warmish kind of spice, possibly some black pepper, but the big emphasis is all about the honey and the grapefruit. Yeah, maybe there's a little bit more juniper kind of coming through now once you've given it some aeration, but anyway, let's see what the palate gives us. Again, plenty of honey. I think what kind of saves is the wrong word, I suppose. What kind of helps this is the fact that obviously the ABV is relatively high at 43%. It doesn't taste like a liqueur. It could have gone down that kind of liqueur-y kind of sweet honeyed kind of character. Again, a bit of citrus. The honey just seems to be very, very overwhelming, and I'm getting a little bit of juniper, but I'm not getting a huge amount. And again, I think this particular type of gin is going to be an acquired taste. I think if you like honey and you have a fondness for that, I think you'll enjoy this. But for me, again, I'm just not quite so sure of the balance. Again, I would like to have seen a little bit more juniper and maybe a little bit less honey, and maybe it's kind of difficult to get that balance, I suppose, when you're dealing with sort of something that's quite intrinsically pretty sweet. So, but again, I think it's a sort of gin that some people will like, and I think other people probably won't be quite so keen on it. But I think that quality-wise, that's good. It doesn't matter how bad. Right, okay, so on to the rhubarb. Like I said, I really don't like rhubarb at all as a kind of fruit. What is it, a fruit? Yeah, I've got no idea. Is it a fruit or is it a legume or whatever? I don't bugger if I know. Just remember my parents used to grow buckets of this stuff, and it's sort of like rhubarb crumble. Oh dear God. Anyway, let's see what the gin's about, rather than me pontificating about bloody rhubarb crumble. It's quite delicate. It's elegant. It's got a nice balance between the sweeter rhubarb notes and the slightly sort of acidic, bittery sort of rhubarb. And like I said, I think this is the nicest rhubarb gin I've ever tasted. And I was badgered to death to get a bloody rhubarb gin for the list, and this is kind of where the thing started. I thought, yes, we'll get the Warner Edwards rhubarb because it's the best that I've tasted so far, and everybody seems to sort of go crazy for it. I mean, anyway. I like the balance. The balance is good. The rhubarb is not too intense. It's subtle. It allows the juniper character to come through, along with that little bit of spice as well, a bit of black pepper, a bit of cinnamon, possibly some coriander, maybe. I don't know. Don't know if they add anything different to. Maybe not. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think the balance is really nice. It's not sort of slap you in the face with rhubarb character. It's elegant. It's elegant, and it's I find quite appealing in actual fact. Anyway, palate. Slightly more syrup on the palate, a little bit sweeter, a Again, it has that sort of obvious rhubarb character and a sort of almost kind of berry kind of character going on as well. Again, very elegant. The juniper kind of cuts through. I think the ABV again kind of stops it being overly sweet and gives it a kind of like a counterbalance. And yeah, that's lovely. I mean, it's an easygoing, all very natural rhubarb gin, and I think that's like I said, it is certainly, in my personal opinion, the nicest of the rhubarb gins that I've tasted. So yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. And finally, let's move on to the Sloe gin. Let's see what the next is on this end. Whoa, cumin! Whoa, I mean that's a huge hit of cumin. I don't know whether they use cumin in. I don't know what the botanicals are. I don't know whether this is just basically the Harrington with sloes macerated in, but I certainly get cumin. I get loads of it, you know. I get some nice berried notes. It's got that sort of slightly bitter sloe kind of character, but there's some syrup to kind of again balance it. A touch of almost vanilla, very very slight juniper note, but that seems to be the thing with sloe gins. The sloes tend to be the most predominant characteristic, and some of them tend to sort of like be very very OTT on the sloe and not an awful lot of gin. And although this is kind of edging in that way, I think this is quite nice. It's quite pleasantly balanced. I said cumin. I just get so much cumin. It is untrue. Let's see what the palate's like. Less earthy than some. Kind of opens up with a little bit more of the kind of slow bitterness before the syrup kind of moves in and kind of balances it up. It's a little bit of juniper, a little bit of cinnamon, touch, not quite so much cumin on the palate, it has to be said, which is yeah, I kind of, it's okay. It's sort of, I guess sloe gins, and I'm sort of almost a little bit ambivalent about, to be bluntly honest with you. They are what they are, so to speak, and some tend to sort of be quite bitter and earthy, and some tend to be quite sweet and sort of berried and what have you. This kind of has a bit of both to a certain extent, although on the palate it's more towards the sweeter sort of syrupy sort of berry kind of character, which is okay. I mean, again, it's sort of, you know, it does what it says on the tin, I suppose, and you know, you're either going to kind of love sloe gin or you're not going to love sloe gin. What I don't think is any doubt is the quality of it, in actual fact. So yeah, another pleasant one. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. I love the Harrington. The Harrington dry gin, I think, is absolutely fantastic. It is just classic gin, and sometimes that's all you want. And I really hope to God that, you know, over the next year or so, a lot of these weird and wonderful botanical wacky bloody gins bite the dust, because, you know, I get the feeling that there's a lot of people producing gins just to see what wacky botanicals we can whack into a gin, you know, and I think people are starting to get a little bit bored of it, and hopefully they'll all kind of bloody disappear. But that one, I think the Harrington dry gin is absolutely fab, really really nice. The Elderflower gin, I'm kind of not going to rave about the Elderflower gin, but it has plenty of Elderflower character, and if that's what you want, then, you know, that certainly delivers. It has that kind of old Tommy kind of sweetness, and I think they kind of work quite nicely together, in actual fact. Maybe I'd like to have seen a little bit more juniper notes kind of coming through, but again, it's certainly elderflower. I'm going to have to say that I was really disappointed by the Melissa. Certainly, like I said, on the first time that I tasted it, I really liked it. It was an absolute riot of botanicals, and I just think that this batch is just not up to previous batches, and it happens. And like I said, I think the key to this particular one was, I think, was the cut point. I think some faints got into the cut, and I don't think it's done that particular gin any favours whatsoever. The Honeybee, yeah, okay. Again, it's not a gin that I think I'm going to sort of rave about, but again, quality. And I think if you like this, if you like honey and you like that kind of thing, I think it's a gin that you would quite happily enjoy. So again, maybe not something I would consider sort of like stocking personally, but I think certainly, like I said, if you like that kind of thing, you'll enjoy it. The rhubarb gin, well, I think aside from the sort of the Harrington dry gin, I think this is certainly they really have absolutely nailed the rhubarb gin. Considering I hate rhubarb, I could quite happily drink this. It has to be said, and it is by far and away the nicest rhubarb gin that I have tasted so far. And I haven't tasted a huge amount of rhubarb gin, but I've tasted a lot of gin, and I think that's not that I wish to sort of blow my own trumpet, but I think that's high praise, I think. The Sloe gin, I kind of can't quite like that. I consider sticking that on the shelf. I think it's got a nice balance between the sweetness and the bitterness that you get with Sloes. It's possibly a little bit syrupy on the palate, but then again, sort of a lot of people tend to have sort of like quite a sweet tooth, so they kind of enjoy that kind of thing. So overall, I think the range that Warner Edwards produces is very impressive. I think the quality is very good, and like all of these kind of things, you're going to find some that you really like and some that you maybe not quite so keen on. And I certainly think that has been the case with today's tasting. So hopefully I've been fair. Hopefully you've enjoyed this week's episode of the show. Not quite sure what the next one is going to be, but it's probably going to come a little bit quicker than you actually think. Anyway, so good Grammy and good afternoon.